All right, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to our live webinar on ISO certification. This is brought to you by Manufacturer San Jose and Dan Terry, President and CEO of the Quality Resource Center. My name is Matthew Kenny, and I'll be co-hosting this event today. For those that don't know, Manufacturer San Jose is a nonprofit organization whose goal is to help manufacturing businesses start, grow, and stay in the beautiful city of San Jose. We do that through direct advising with businesses. We advocate for the industry at City Hall, and we also host networking or educational events just like this webinar. I won't steal too much of Dan's thunder, but the Quality Resource Center is an ISO consultation firm that has been advising businesses with the ISO process for over 30 years. Dan has a wealth of knowledge on this topic and has been kind enough to donate some of his time to share with us all today. So Dan will be guiding us through this process for approximately 30 minutes today. We'll save some room at the end for questions and open discussion. If you do have a question during the presentation, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. Should be at the bottom of your Zoom box there. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to drop in the chat. We may be able to answer it as we go, but if nothing else, we'll be able to reference it at the end during our Q&A. So one last time, thank you so much for being here today. And with that, I will hand it off to Dan. Take it away, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just technical check here. So is the presentation up for everyone? Is it visible?
I think, yep, loud and clear, or bright and visible.
Great. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks, Matt, for that nice intro. As Matt mentioned, my name is Dan Terry. I'm the CEO of the Quality Resource Center. We've been around for about 30 years. I've been the CEO for, 12 years or so. My background prior to taking over the Quality Resource Center was largely in microelectronics, specifically semiconductor memories, quality, heavy emphasis on automotive, aerospace and military products, as well as medical devices. Also exposure in something called LiDAR and mechatronics, which is a fancy word for robots. We welcome you, and we're glad you could join us. So let's see if there we go. So some of the topics we're going to cover today are probably some of the who, what, and wheres that you've been curious about. We'll start by introducing ourselves, QRC. We'll talk about a little bit about what the ISO 9001 standard is, who is ISO, and then who should use it, what are some of the advantages. We'll talk a little bit about the standard, certifications and the certification process, and then auditing, both internal and external. We're going to look briefly at a typical project and some typical costs and ROI, a bit of discussion on maintenance, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A at the end. Before we continue, are there any general questions we should consider as we go through the material? All right. If not, we will take the plunge. So who are we? Quality Resource Center. As Matt mentioned, we're actually the original ISO based consulting firm in the world. We've been around for about 30 years. Started in San Jose back in 1992. I've been working with them. I got my original training at QRC back about 20 years ago when I was still in the semiconductor world. Went to work as a consultant for them a few years back, and then became the president and CEO, like I say, about 12 years ago or so. We specialize in assisting clients. We've assisted thousands of clients in achieving their quality, information security, and environmental management system goals. We have a highly trained staff and professionals, very experienced people offering decades of quality, data, and environmental management system expertise and experience. We are headquartered in San Jose at 111 North Market Street, Suite 300. We have a very nice training center there, and obviously we're all local, so we know it's within 20 minutes or so of three major international airports and pretty close to Sacramento as well. And we're very proud. In 2020, we opened our New York City office located at 315 Madison Avenue, and it's very close to the Grand Central Station. We offer superior expertise in a variety of standards, not the least of which is the ISO 9001-2015, but also the ISO 14001-2015, which is the environmental management standard, which is quite popular in doing integrated system with the 9001. We also offer expertise in 1345, which is the medical device standard, the IATF 16949, which is the automotive standard, AS 9100D, which is the aerospace standard, and then ISO 27001, which is the information security management system standard. So most of these, other than the 27001, or all of these actually, are supersets of 9001. What that means is that everything in those standards is included in 9001. There's just some additional requirements. We do system designs, upgrades, and integrated systems. So, for example, some people might want to integrate a 14001 with a 2015. They might want to integrate a 2015 9001 with 1345, and so on and so forth. We specialize in what we call turnkey system designs and implementation, as well as training. We do auditing. We do a lot of auditing. We do internal auditor certification, and we also do quite a bit and much more these days of what's known as outsourced quality management. And we'll talk a bit about that near the end of the slide deck. Some of our valued clients include some pretty popular household names. You're probably familiar with a lot of these folks. Yeah, we're very privileged to have worked with some very prominent clients. So let's get started. So you may be asking yourself, what is this ISO 9001-2015 thing? ISO 9001 is the international standard that specifies the requirements for a quality management system. And going forward, we'll interchangeably refer to that as a quality management system or simply as a QMS. ISO 9001 certification applies to organizations. What that means is that you could be a company, you could be a part of a company, you could be a small part of a company, but your organization can be certified to the standard. And organizations use the standard to demonstrate the ability to consistently provide products and services that meet customer and regulatory requirements. It's the most popular standard in the ISO 9000 series and the only standard in the series which an organization can be certified to. Who is ISO? ISO 9001 was first published in 1987 by the International Organization for Standardization. For some reason, they refer to themselves as ISO. I don't know why they don't refer to themselves as iOS. Maybe that just sounds funny, but they refer to themselves as ISO. It's an international agency composed of the national standard bodies of more than 160 countries. The current revision of the ISO 9001 was released in September of 2015, hence the revision notation ISO 9001-2015. Previous standards were the 2008 version, the 2000 version, the 1994 version, and the 1987 version. The International Organization for Standardization is an independent, non-governmental organization whose membership consists of different national standards bodies. And as of 2022, there were 167 members representing ISO in their country, with each country having only one member. Who should use ISO 9001 2015? As I mentioned before, the standard applies to any organization, regardless of size or industry. We've actually done organizations as small as 2 guys very successfully. They were in the chemical distribution business. They were doing about $10 million a year between them. And they were 2-man operation. And so we do small organizations. As I mentioned before, we've done work with the Air Force and other very, very large organizations. So any organization, regardless of size or industry. We've done work in everything from computer chips to potato chips. So that's one of the cool things about our business. We get to see a very, very great variety of organizations. We've done quite a few machine shops over the years. I look back before this presentation, we've done probably in the neighborhood of close to 100 machine or similar types of organizations over the years. More than 1 million organizations from those 160 countries have applied the standard requirements to their quality management systems. And organizations of all types and sizes find that using the ISO standard helps them do things like ensure that their customers consistently receive high quality products and services, which in turn brings many benefits, including satisfied customers, management, and employees. As businessmen, this is just an aside, I think as businessmen, we all know that we really desire to attract and maintain customers. It's actually much easier to maintain a valued customer than it is to identify new clients. And satisfying the requirements is one of the ways we can do that. Proper quality management can improve business, often having a positive effect on investment, market share, sales growth, sales margin, competitive advantage, and avoidance of litigation. So just a note on that, in terms of litigation, ISO 9001 isn't going to make you immune from litigation. However, on the unfortunate occasion that may occur, it certainly is a sign of due diligence that your firm or organization has pursued an international quality management system and successfully been registered to that standard. Some of the additional benefits, by assessing the context, your organizations can clearly define who is affected by your work and what they expect. This enables clearly stated business objectives and the identification of new business opportunities. Very important, sort of linking back to the litigation aspect. It'll also help you identify and address risks associated with your organization, not just from a liability standpoint, but also from a business standpoint. Where are your competitors standing against you? What kind of products are they offering and competing with you against? What sort of investments they're making? Maybe there are things happening in the regulatory world that you need to be aware of, and so on and so forth. So it's very beneficial in that regard. Of course, by putting your customers first, your organizations can make sure that you consistently meet customer demands and enhance customer satisfaction. This can lead to more repeat customers, new clients, and increased business for your organization. Some more advantages include working in a more efficient way as your processes are aligned and understood by everyone. This helps increase productivity and efficiency and bringing internal costs down. Organizations like yours will meet necessary statutory and regulatory requirements. And you can expand into new markets and some sectors as clients require ISO 9001 before doing business. We'll talk a little bit about more about item F near the end of the slide deck. And now, because the standard specifies the requirements for an effective QMS, organization finds that the standard helps them organize their QMS, help create satisfied customers, management, and employees, continually improve their processes, and something item D that I'm very certain that folks in your industry are very sensitive to, eliminating waste and cutting costs by, and of course, eliminating scrap and eliminating rework is a good way to increase your bottom line. And just an example of some of the cost savings that are possible, the Clark County School District in Nevada successfully deployed the ISO 9001 to save $174 million over 10 years in actual expenditures and cost avoidance. There were 3,000 employees trained to the standard, and it enabled three critical components of the system's success, that being training, communication, and efficiency. Let's talk a little bit about the standard itself. What is it? The ISO 9001-2015 Quality Management System Requirements. It's basically a document of approximately 30 pages available from the national standards organizations in each country, as well as other bodies online you can procure it from. It's the only standard in the 9000 family that is directly audited against for third-party assessment purposes. What kind of topics does 9001-2015 cover? ISO 9001 is based on, it's a very famous plan, do, check, act methodology. And this the PDCA is sort of a holy concept in the quality world. It's used in automotive, consumer electronics, aerospace, you name it. It's a foundational approach for any successful QMS. It provides a process-oriented approach. Now, in previous standards prior to 2000, there were it was more of a individual sort of aspect of how the standard was applied. The new approach is a process-oriented approach, which is much more aligned with the implementation in business, and also much more adaptable to individual organizations, rather than dictating, from a top-down approach what you must do. The analysis is done up front to see what processes you're engaged in, how they're linked together, and how they can function in a more efficient fashion. So it's a process-oriented approach to documenting and reviewing the structure, responsibilities, and procedures that you require to achieve an effective quality management in an organization. Some specific sections of the standard address many topics that you're probably intuitively familiar with. But for example, requirements include documented information, planning and determining of the process interaction. What are your responsibilities as management? How do you manage resources, including human resources, and an organization's work environment? From a management standpoint, we really have limited but very important resources. We have people, we have tools, and we have training. And how we manage and deploy those resources to achieve our goals is really the key to our success. Product realization, including the steps from design to delivery. And then an important area known as measurement, analysis, and improvement. So we've got our processes now. We know what they are and how they interact. How are we going to measure them to ensure that we're achieving our goals? And then what are we going to do when we may not meet those goals, or when we've exceeded those goals? And we do these through things like internal audits and corrective and preventive action. And of course, corrective and preventive action can pertain not just to our own internal processes, but they may also be required by our customers, or we may require them from our vendors. So it works on both sides of the ecosystem. As I mentioned before, the layout of the standard follows the plan do check act cycle in a process-based approach, which further includes this to include risk-based thinking. The risk aspect of the standard was introduced in in the 2015 standard. It had previously been referred to, and you'll probably still hear it referred to as preventive action, but doing the risk analysis up front provides a much clearer vision of what sorts of risks the organization might face. Quality objectives are needed to determine the conformity of the requirements, and not just to your specific parts and items you might manufacture. Quality objectives can include other things, like on-time delivery, how quickly you can turn a design, what's your first article inspection report success rate, what's your first off the line kind of success rate, and those kinds of things. Profitability might be a goal that you achieve for yourself, for certain cost cutting considerations. So when we talk about quality objectives, we don't limit it just to product related things. They can be anything that could generate value for the organization. And then, of course, the standard requires the organization to document any procedures required for its effective operation. The nice thing about this is, whereas previously there were certain documents that had to be generated and they were dictated by the standard, that's no longer the case. For the most part, there are still a couple, but the standard allows you as an organization to identify those procedures you require for effective operation, and then limit your generation of those documents to just those procedures. So much more efficient, much more streamlined, much more specific to your organization. The standard also requires your organization to issue and communicate a documented quality policy, a quality management system scope, and quality objectives. We talked about the quality objectives before. The scope of the QMS could be something, you may run individual lines in your company, on a specific machine or this, that, or the other thing, or a specific product. That scope is what captures that. So for example, if you're making a specific product on a specific machine, and that's all you want to certify that particular organization, that would be the nature of your scope. As I mentioned before, there is a requirement for an organization to assess risks and opportunities and determine the internal and external issues relevant to its purpose and strategic direction. Some popular tools for risk analysis, we have some nice ones that are pretty popular within the industry, but things like PFMEAs and control plans, are very effective in that regard. And then, of course, the organization must demonstrate how the standards requirements are being met, while the external auditor's role is to determine the quality management system effectiveness. So basically, we'll talk about, there's a couple of types of audits that that you'll be familiar with. We'll talk about that a little later in the slide deck. Talk a bit about certifications. So an organization that's applying for ISO 9001 certification is audited based on extensive samples of sites, functions, products, and services. And this is a certification audit. Upon completion, certification auditor presents a list of findings. You'll always have findings. Some of them are good, some not so good, and some perhaps not so good. But they're generally defined as either nonconformities, observations, or OFIs. Nonconformities fall into two categories, major and minor. So for the rest of your existence, when you get audited, you're going to probably get some minor nonconformities. That's okay because you're not perfect and no system is. And there's always room for improvement. Observations could be very positive. And then OFIs are minor things that an auditor might present to you that don't reach the level of a nonconformity, but would be nice to have. And what you'll find is if you have recurring audits over the course of a year or two, and you have, the same OFI coming up, they might escalate that to a minor nonconformity.
Hey, Dan, quick question.
Yes, sir.
How often do the audits happen?
There are two kinds of audits. There's the internal audits, which you can do as often as you want. And then there are the registrar audits, which typically, we'll talk about that, but the audit cycle for the external registrar audits, they'll come and visit you the first time, they'll do an audit, and typically they'll come back in a year and come back every year for 3 years. And then at the end of 3 years, you'll get a renewal. So initial registration audit, then what they call surveillance audits, and then at the end of your registration period, a re-registration audit. Frankly speaking, different names for the same thing.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, one of the requirements for the certification audit is that you also have that full round of internal audits on an annual basis. So, as well as an annual management review. Now, some larger companies like to break that into, quarterly kinds of things so they can align it with their budgeting process. Some do it on a biannual level. A lot of them do it on an annual level. We have a lot of clients that do it on an annual level, and they do just fine. Now, if there are no major nonconformities, the certification body issues a certificate. If there are major nonconformities, they're not going to do that. They'll give you 30 days to fix it. Or if it's in the case of a surveillance or a re-registration audit, they'll give you 30 days to fix it, or they'll yank your cert. In the automotive world and the aerospace world, much more serious. If you get a major nonconformance, you kind of have to tell your customers that you've had a major boo-boo and you've got a big problem. Aerospace world, it'll go into Oasis. Everybody knows, and it's a very, very bad thing. We at QRC, in our 30 plus years of operation, have never had a major nonconformance written against any system that we've ever designed and deployed. We have, on the other hand, corrected some major nonconformances issued to some very, very large companies, specifically in the automotive and aerospace world. So as I mentioned, when major nonconformances are identified, the organization presents an improvement plan to the certification body. For example, corrective action reports showing how the problem will be resolved. Once the certification body is satisfied that the organization has carried out sufficient corrective action, it issues a cert. Cert's limited to that scope we talked about. For example, the production of golf balls. So, let's say you're Titleist. You only want to certify your golf balls, then you'd only do your golf balls. If you only want to do your putters, you do your putters. If you want to do more than that, you change your scope. For minor nonconformances, what will typically happen there is the registrar will ask you to submit a plan, and then they'll check that plan and the results prior to the next surveillance audit, and then they'll do a more thorough job at the next surveillance audit. So basically what it boils down to is you get a year to fix stuff, and that's what they're interested in. So as I mentioned before, the certificate is not a once and for all award. It's got to be renewed, and that's in compliance with yet another ISO standard. at regular intervals, which are recommended by the CB. So CB certification body, and usually, like I say, once every 3 years. And it's good to know that there are no grades of competence within ISO 9001. A company is either certified or it is not. In this respect, ISO 9001 certification contrasts with measurement-based quality systems, which are scoring and things like that, which are still popular.
Dan, quick question on the recertification. You mentioned earlier we saw in 2015 a new set of rules or new kind of guidelines on the certification came out. If, say, in 2024, they issued a new 9001 certification, would you immediately have to be certified for that, or would you wait for your 3-year recertification on your normal schedule?
So there'll be a grace period. And if I recall correctly, the last time it was 2 years or something. And typically the changes are evolutionary, they're not revolutionary, so they're not that hard to handle. So I guess the point you're kind of looking at is, will they yank the rug out from under you when they up the up the standard? The answer is no, they won't do that. But they will eventually have to convert. So, for example, now, if no certification body issues any registrations to ISO 9001 2008, that's obsolete, and they don't do that. It's all 2015 now. And I suspect in 2024, around that time, they may or may not do it. Frankly, there's no plan at this time that I'm aware of to revise the standard. That doesn't mean they won't do it. But like I say, it's not really that big a deal. Once you're in that kind of world, staying there is actually pretty easy. And again, it's important to note the ISO, International Organization for Standardization, does not certify organizations yourself. So your cert's not going to be written by ISO. It's going to be written by a certification body, which we deal with all the major CBs. They're audited by another organization before they can issue certificates to organizations like yours. So, there's auditing all the way up and down the line. I shouldn't say it that way. There's auditing and conformance to requirements all up and down the line. And it's pretty seamless. So before the CB can issue or renew a certificate, the auditor must be satisfied the company being assessed has implemented the requirements of sections 4 through 10. So in the standard, there are 4 clauses, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. There's an additional sections 1 and 3 that are not directly audited against, but because they do provide context and definitions for the rest of the standard, their content should be taken into account. Talking about auditing, so there are 2 types of audits, as we mentioned before. Auditing by an external CB, that's an external audit, and then audits by internal staff or outsourced internal audits to someone like us. We do a lot of internal auditing for a lot of clients to satisfy this need. And those are referred to as internal audits. You may get audited, you probably have been audited by customers. That's usually outside the scope of this, although some customers may just say, in terms of our audit, are you certified? And if you say yes, then that's kind of good enough.
In terms of auditing, Dan, is this just these organizations or even internally looking at your quality management system, like the procedures you have in place, or are they actually like coming to visit your shop and seeing what's going on?
What happens is, let's look at the initial certification audit. What's going to happen? It's typically, and I think this is addressed later in the slide deck, it's typically broken into 2 phases or stages, stage 1 and stage 2. So stage 1 says, we want to look at your quality management system, so send us your materials and so on and so forth. We're going to look at them off-site, typically, and compare them against the standard to make sure that the QMS you've deployed complies with the standard. During stage 2, they're going to come on site. Now, during the pandemic, that was somewhat limited, but on-site auditing is becoming, is coming back into vogue with the lifting of the restrictions because of the COVID. So they'll come back on site, and at that point, they will say, okay, you've got a compliant system. Are you doing what's in the system, kind of thing? So stage 1, does the system comply with the standard? Stage 2, are you complying with your system? Typical. So we'll talk about this when we get to the typical example. But for organizations, let's say, well, let's just wait till that point.
Sure.
So again, the aim of a is a continual review and assessment process that verifies the system's working as it's supposed to, find out where it can be improved, and correct or prevent identified problems. Now, one thing we do much better than anyone else is some organizations may look at certification as a requirement that they have to adhere to, just so they can get their diploma, just so they can, say that they have it. Other organizations that we work with, we want to make very, very certain that the system's delivering value to management in terms of making decisions, as we mentioned before, about resource allocation. So what does that mean? It means that we've identified our processes, we've identified the scope of what we're doing, and now we have also identified our objectives that we know we need to meet to achieve our business objectives. The system should deliver valuable information in how you allocate resources to meet those goals. And as you talked about before, resources are fairly limited to people, training, and equipment. So, the trick is allocating people, equipment, and training to meet the goals you've established for yourself. And if we can design and deploy a system that helps provide the client with information that helps them make those decisions, we've really got it licked. So that's the sweet spot. That's Goldilocks. We do that better than anyone else. It's generally considered healthier for internal auditors to audit outside their usual management line, to bring a degree of independence to their judgment. And it's even actually better in many respects to have an outside firm like ours do that, because we're fully independent auditors. There are no group dynamics involved, for example, a subordinate auditing a manager or a competitor within a company, that sort of thing. So that approach removes that aspect of the audit. So what's a typical turnkey project outline look like, and what are some of the major milestones? So generally, a typical project outline consists of the following steps. Some strategic meetings up front. We have a data collection and team selection process we go through. We help to develop policies, specifically that quality policy we talked about, and that process and interactions map, which is the foundation of your QMS. From that, we develop the key process indicators. So once we've identified the processes involved, we identify the key processes, and then we apply what are called KPI indicators with goals and metrics to measure your key process. Typically, my thinking has always been in this regard, I don't like to see more than 3 to 5 key processes. We want to identify those very, very top level elements that are critical to management. The last thing you as an executive think about at night, the first thing you think about in the morning, everything else should funnel upwards to support those KPIs. But definitely 3 to 5 very meaty KPIs. Generally speaking, after that, there's your materials, your manual, procedures, work instructions, and records. The manual, we have probably the crispest most efficient quality manual in the industry. Our approach generally results in about 20 single-sided pages of double-spaced material, very, very precise, and keyed directly to your organization. Probably around 12 to 15 what are called level 2 procedures. Work instructions for machine shops, typically you're pretty good at that. It's just the nature of your business that you need those to produce the things that you do. And then, of course, the records themselves. Training, depending on the organization. Some of your people may be experts. Some might require some training. We finalize the system documentation, and then we implement it. At that point, you're operating under the ISO. And this is called the operational phase. At the end of the operational phase, and the operational phase typically runs anywhere between 60 and 90 days, your first internal audits are conducted. And the reason the operational phase is required is you've got to have to generate the records necessary to have a successful internal audit and CAPA loop. And CAPA is an acronym for corrective and preventive action. At that point, you're ready for your management review and final stage 1 preparation. The stage 1 register audits are then conducted. You're going to have corrective actions. The stage 2 register audits are going to be conducted. You're going to have corrective actions at that point. But at the end of that stage 1 registrar audit meeting, you'll be recommended for certification. Typical costs. So I just pick and this is scalable, so you can kind of apply it to the size of your organization. But say a 20,000 square foot operation doing one shift. And the reason the shift is important is if you're running multiple shifts, audits have to be conducted during every shift. But just for the sake of speaking, for our consideration, one shift, maybe 20 people, no design. Let's say you're just working from customer prints. You're looking at a QRC turnkey QMS implementation. That means everything soup to nuts of around 14 to 16K, maybe 15K. We invoice typically in 3 phases over 4 to 6 months. We don't require any upfront deposits or retainers. We try to spread the invoicing out, as I say, over the 4 to 6 months time frame of the actual project. Sometimes it's a bit more, depends on how fast you want to go. We can typically, we've done it so many times, we can probably move a lot faster than you can, but you might not be comfortable moving that fast, or maybe you want to go a bit quicker. But 4 to 6 months, start to finish, is a good rule of thumb. Your registrar costs are going to run you between 3 and 5K, and that should cover your stage 1 and stage 2 audits. And then you're good for a year. And at the end of that year, you're going to have the annual maintenance costs of 5 to 7K, which would include, if you decided to have us do your internal audits, probably a little more than half of that is that number. But you definitely will have to pay for your registrar surveillance audits. They're going to come and visit you for 2, maybe 3 days. So just to kind of give you an idea, internal audits I should have dropped this into the deck. Internal audits from this standpoint, actually, I'll talk about that during maintenance. That's probably even better. So what do you get out of it? What's your ROI? That's really the critical notion, yeah. So your businesses thrive on purchase orders. Purchase orders are what drive the organization. Now, many, if not all, of your customers maintain an approved vendor list and will not issue POs unless a vendor is active on the AVL. And this is especially true for customers that are themselves ISO certified. If you're ISO certified, you really can't be issuing purchase orders to anyone who's not on your AVL. And while there are a number of ways your business can be added to your customer's AVL, the easiest and fastest way is to simply present your valid, active ISO 9001 certificate. And put simply, the ISO cert makes it easier for you to get on a potential customer's AVL. And this makes it a lot easier for them to issue purchase orders to you. More purchase orders mean more orders, and more orders mean more revenue. Now, in terms of maintenance, we offer all kinds of goodies. But let's talk about audits specifically. Internal audits, let's say for our model company we've talked about, can typically be done in about less than a week's time. So what the typical scenario in that regard is, we generally take 1 day for prep and planning of the audit, 2 to 3 days on site to do the audits, typically 2.5, but 2 to 3, depending on the size of the organization, complexity, do they do design, how many ships, that kind of thing. But say 2 to 3, and then two days to write up your report. You're talking generally about 40 hours a year from the internal audit aspect to maintain it. And that includes your management rep services, because you've got to have that management review meeting as well. Your audit for that typical company we just talked about, I would say worst case, that stage 1 audit's offsite. The stage 2 audit on site, your initial audit might be 2.5 to 3 days, but I doubt it. Likely to be more like 2 days. Again, depending on the size, number of employees, number of shifts, and whether or not you engage in design. Going forward, they'll probably come visit you 2 days a year, and they'll probably charge you, a couple $1,000. But they would probably include modest travel. So one of the important considerations when selecting your certification bodies, do they have auditors in your area? Because travel can be important. And also, how do you feel about them? Are you comfortable working with them? Sometimes I've had some great people I've worked with over the years, but every once in a while there's, for no intentional reason, sometimes just don't mesh well. And of course, that's easily resolved by just, requesting another auditor. So again, some of our services, include, as you grow, you may be interested in things like, sometimes we do what's called escort services for registrar audits. So when your registrar comes to visit you, some clients like us to be there. Now, we can't speak directly to them, but we can act as your eyes and ears and tell you what to do in kind of real time, how things are going. We also do supplier audits. We also do escorts for customer audits in case you have findings or things like that. Like I said, the management representative services, management review. We are pretty rock solid in Six Sigma expertise and training. I'm a green belt myself. Document control, corrective and preventive actions, KPI development, the FEMA control plan, and SPC stuff we talked about. Those are very valuable in your risk assessments and your measurement systems and analysis. And then 6S expertise and training, which is a really, you may or may not be familiar, it's very popular in the machine shop world. And that's it. I appreciate your patience. I know we've covered a lot of material here. And I appreciate you spending the time with us. And I'll just go ahead and throw it out for roundtable Q&A, questions, anything you'd like to ask.
Yeah, that was awesome. Thank you so much, Dan. Anyone, if you have any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or we do have the chat box. You can drop it in there and I can relay that question to Dan. That was a fantastic wealth of information there, Dan. Thank you again.
You are welcome, sir.
I do have a couple questions myself, maybe as people are gathering their thoughts. I remember you talked about the quality management system. It impacts, your tools, your materials, your training, your processes, but also the human resources. That I thought was kind of interesting. I think intuitively it's easy to understand, tools and materials and such. But can you talk about a little bit more about the requirements for kind of your employees, maybe from a management perspective?
Yeah.
Um, what needs to be documented? What does that include?
So I'll boil it down. What that requirement really means, there's a couple aspects of it, but in terms of the ability of a particular employee to execute a particular function. So let's say you've got a high-end CNC machine, you've got some requirements you need from someone to work on that machine. What's important is that those requirements be documented and in the human resource area, if you have them, and that person is capable of doing it. So, for example, it might be something along the lines of high school graduate, certain level of training on machine X, 5 years of experience as a machine operator, able to read prints, understanding understanding certain techniques and measurement techniques,
Hmm.
so on and so forth. And then that person is actually capable to that. And what's
Got it.
nice, that gets back to the resource thing. As we develop our employees, which is important, it gives us a snapshot of what they are right now. And, as they want to progress to something, senior operator, uh, shop floorman, that kind of thing, it'll help us identify the steps they need to take to achieve, uh, that next level of promotion.
Yeah. It sounds generally kind of like intuitive stuff that management does, but it's just a matter of thoroughly documenting it, right? And keeping it, front and center and making
Right.
sure there's no confusion about it all.
What we want to make sure is that we don't ask our employees to do something they're not capable of. Not, there's nothing nefarious about that, but it's important that we clearly understand what they're capable of. They clearly understand what their role is, especially in the overall scheme of things, and that they feel very comfortable with what we're asking them to do. Employees really like that aspect of the standard because they feel like their individual circumstances are being considered and taken into account, and they're not being asked to do things that they can't do. There's nothing worse than being asked to do. So I couldn't run a CNC machine, not for the life of me. Um, and so it's important that we put the right people in the right spot.
Awesome. Duly noted. Any other questions from the group here? If not, I think we can go ahead and wrap it up and wish you guys well on the rest of your afternoon. That was Dan Terry from the Quality Resource Center, headquartered here in San Jose. I definitely learned a lot from that, and I hope you all did too. With this new information, I hope you guys are empowered to make a more informed decision about pursuing the ISO process. Definitely one of my big takeaways is how much these certifications can open up your business to more and larger purchase orders with bigger businesses. I'm sure that's something that's on every business owner's mind. But now that we've learned something new today, what are our next steps? Again, if you're interested in earnestly pursuing the process, please do reach out to Dan. He's got his contact information on the slide there, or myself, and I can connect you directly. Dan, I hope I'm not speaking out of line, but you did mention kind of a special package in mind for local businesses that it seems to be very high value for the outcomes that you can achieve.
It is, and just kind of to dot the I and cross the T. We just to give you an idea of what we are with our clients for the long haul. We have clients that we've had for 30 years. So when we're developing, I was lucky enough to do semiconductor startups. And I know in this valley for sure, things can change. So, for example, when we did the quality management system for Tesla, Tesla wasn't Tesla, but Tesla's Tesla's now. And in this valley, there's unlimited potential. So, what am I trying to say? We want you as a client and a partner forever. We're always there for you. So, we are not the cheapest. We're not the most expensive. We give the best value, and we work with our clients and we stay with our clients forever. So we value each of them as a partner. And yeah, we will. One of the things we specialize in is making sure that you achieve your goals.
Awesome. Yeah. And, speaking of helping you achieve your goals, again, Manufacturer San Jose is a nonprofit, and our whole goal is to help manufacturers grow and stay here in San Jose. So for anyone watching this or listening to this, if there are any areas of your business that are keeping you up at night, please do feel free to reach out to me. We have a number of fantastic and extremely knowledgeable advisors that are experts in a variety of fields. That can be marketing or online presence, business strategy, legal issues, real estate, pretty wide breadth. Depending on your needs, we can deploy those advisors to you at no cost. So with that, we are right at 12 p.m. Thanks again, everybody, for attending. I will follow up with my contact, Dan's contacts, and a copy of the recording for y'all.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Dan.
Everyone, thanks so much for joining. We appreciate it.
Yep.
Have a good rest of the day.
Feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Cheers. Thanks, folks.
Take care.